Good morning and welcome to the City of Palm Springs Historic Site Preservation Board meeting of Tuesday, July 11th. I'd like to call for quiet in the audience, please. And also, if you would be so kind as to silence your cell phones. May we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Vincent Marsh is absent. Member Kaiser is absent. Member Dixon is excused. Member Lavoie?
Here.
Member Hayes?
Here.
Vice Chair Burkett?
Here.
Chair Johns?
Here.
You do have a quorum.
All right, thank you very much. And report on the posting of the agenda, please.
The agenda for this meeting was posted in public review at the City Hall Bulletin Board on the west side of the Council Chamber and in the Planning Department counter in accordance with applicable law.
All right, and I'll take a motion to accept the agenda.
So moved. Second.
I'm sorry, who was the
Marsh
second?
and Burkett. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Very good, thank you. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the audience. This time has been set aside for members of the public to address the Historic Site Preservation Board on agenda items and items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board. Although the Historic Site Preservation Board values your comments, pursuant to the Brown Act, it generally cannot take any action on items not listed on the posted agenda. There will be 3 minutes assigned for each speaker. Testimony for public hearings will be taken at the time of the hearing. We do not have any public hearings this morning, so if you are here to address the board on any issue, now would be the time to do that. So we will now open the public hearing. Any members of the audience wishing to address the board, please come forward, sign in. You will have 3 minutes. Given that there might be a number of speakers this morning, I would ask that you queue up there to the right of the microphone to expedite matters. Any members wishing to speak, please come forward.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Sean Gaines. I'm a general contractor, resident 15 years of Palm Springs. I'm here on behalf of Kevin and Jessica Vander Zanden, who own the home at 252 Sunset Way. They've applied for a building permit, which has been processed, and we are here to seek the approval of this commission to tear the house down. I've brought along the elevations of the house proposed to be put in its place. The footprint of the current building is 1,500 square feet, including the parking carport area. We are adding an additional 600 square feet to the home of living space. So the total square footage will be 2,400 square feet, including the garage parking area. Kevin and Jessica bought this home some 7 or 8 years ago and intend it to be their retirement home, which they were planning on moving into at the end of this year or early next year. They reside in Seattle. They met here in Palm Springs some 10 years ago, fell in love, bought a home, and this is going to be where they're going to spend their retirement years. They picked that neighborhood specifically because of the architecture. They are enthusiastic about mid-century modern aesthetics. However, this particular house has so many internal problems with it that the cost benefit of major renovation and addition was more expensive than tearing it down and beginning anew. The architect has gone out of his way to incorporate his design into the existing architecture of the neighborhood. And as you can see, we have a butterfly roof, flat, lots of glass. The orientation of the house in the neighborhood has not changed. Most of in fact, all of the new square footage will be unseen from the street. The height of the building is within the city ordinance of building height and is no taller than the existing buildings, houses around it. The neighborhood is filled with beautiful examples of Alexander construction and the various architects that were involved in the collaborations of those homes. But also there are numerous examples of Alexander homes in that neighborhood that have been heavily modified, and you could not tell, even if you were an expert on that type of architecture, whether some of those homes are Alexander homes or not. I mean, significant changes to the facades of some of those homes, and not particularly good workmanship, by the way. This home has numerous internal structural problems with it. The slab foundations have 3 significant structural cracks, which makes it very difficult to change and modify and apply new floor coverings and so on and so forth. All of the plumbing has been revamped over many years, and now the plumbing is all attached to the exterior of the house, over the roof, on the backside. There are an electrical upgrade was done many years ago, and all of that new electrical equipment is attached to the face of the surface mounted to the building. And so there are lots of issues that take away, distract from the aesthetic of the mid-century idea.
All right, I appreciate your comments, but before you leave, Ken, I have a question of the applicant's representative. You just stated that the square footage was 1,500 plus?
The total square footage, including the existing parking space, carport, is 1,511 square feet.
Okay, our staff report says 1,258, and
well, I'm sorry, that's without the garage.
No, I understand that, but I don't understand that parking space or garages or carports are included in the square footage.
Well, the application asked for total square footage.
Okay.
So I just put the total square footage, but the actual conditioned living space of the existing structure is 12 something.
58.
The conditioned living space of the new structure is 21 something. Plus
Understood.
The garage.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the board this morning? And again, I do please ask if you wouldn't mind queuing up there, or lining up, as we say here.
Good morning. Excuse me. Good morning, members of the HSPB and city staff. I'm Eric Rosenow, president of the Palm Springs Preservation Foundation. Regarding item 4A, I'm urging the HSPB to deny the demolition permit of 252 North Sunset Way. The home is one of 141 homes in the Sunmore Estates tract, also known as Enchanted Homes. The tract is one of several built by the Alexander Construction Company. The history of these homes is well documented in my colleague at the Foundation's, Jim Harlan's book, The Alexanders, A Desert Legacy. We attribute the design of 252 North Sunset Way to the recently passed William Kreisel of Palmer & Kreisel. The city of Palm Springs in the past few years has designated 2 similar architect-designed tract homes as Class 1 historic sites. Both homes met multiple criteria for designation and protection under the Palm Springs Municipal Code. We believe 252 North Sunset would likewise meet those criteria. In fact, the draft 2015 citywide historic resources inventory recognizes that the Sunmore neighborhood is as a potentially eligible as a historic district, and further identifies 252 North Sunset as contributing to the district. The idea that this house should be demolished in hopes of building something bigger and better contradicts the reasoning that we have historic designation altogether. The current owners believe the garage and a few other minor alterations are forcing them to tear down this home and start anew. However, when you drive through the numerous mid-century neighborhoods of Palm Springs, you will see hundreds of homes that have successfully been rehabilitated. 252 North Sunset can become another one of those success stories that adds to the fabric of both the Sunmore neighborhood and the Palm Springs as a whole. Speaking with many of Sunmore's residents, the common thread is that they bought their homes in a successfully cohesive and well-preserved mid-century neighborhood in Palm Springs. They are highly concerned about this potential demolition. All too frequently, such demolition leads to ill-advised new construction that is out of scale and out of character with the surrounding neighborhood. In short, the replacement is never as good as the original. Again, I urge the HSPB to deny the demolition permit and continue to help preserve the architectural legacy that Palm Springs has to offer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before our next speaker, Ken, may the record reflect that Mr. Marsh has joined the board.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Jim Gazan, and I'm the board chair for the Sunmore Neighborhood Organization. I want to cut away real quickly and say, gosh, I wish I had that problem with my mid-century modern home of a cracked foundation and be able to see that so that I could actually replace all my plumbing with copper through the foundation. Unfortunately, I have beautiful tile floors that makes that not real feasible. I'm here today to request a stay of demolition for the property located at 252 North Sunset Way. As known, the home was designed by Dan Palmer and William Kreisel and built by the Alexander Construction Company in 1958. This home is part of the Enchanted Estates tract. To date, no home has been destroyed in this 100% intact development, which includes the Sunmore neighborhood. This home is not in tear-down condition. In fact, it was used as a vacation rental as early as June 7th of this year. The current owners have owned this investment for over 4 years with the initial intention to renovate. Both Sunrise Park and Sunmore benefit every year, or I should say every other year, from Modernism Week tours, as hundreds of guests marvel at our beautiful, intact neighborhoods, homes, and lifestyle from a revered era. Losing only one home chips away at this experience. This situation has been eye-opening and a wake-up call. This is a start of an epidemic that will grow in Palm Springs, as desirable lots will be worth more than the structure on them. We cannot afford to tango with this trend, as it has destroyed many neighborhoods throughout California and the country. It only takes one, then two. Losing one of these treasures is like tearing a page from this book. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Alex Statier.
You might want to raise that up a little bit if you can. You're a
Never
little
been
taller
a
than...
rock star before.
Is that good? Okay.
Hello, 1, 2. Good morning. My name is Alex Statier, and I am a neighbor on Sunset Way. I live at 289 Sunset Way. And I was very surprised by this late notice of the demolition of 252 Sunset Way. And we've had very little time to prepare, but I do have with me 12 letters from neighbors of the street who are opposing the demolition, 13, who are opposing the demolition of 252 Sunset, at least until more study has been done. Now, I own a mid-century. I've seen a lot of mid-centuries. I know a lot of people with Alexanders. They're very easy homes to work with. This particular home is set in a part of a neighborhood that is absolutely immaculate in my perspective. It's all Alexanders on one side of the road and Meiselmans on the other side, so it's the only example that I know of this in Palm Springs. And knowing the importance of architecture in Palm Springs, I think this is something that should really be taken into consideration before we replace it with another design from another era, which nothing against the current proposed design, but this is more about the neighborhood cohesiveness. And you know, we need to remember that I understand that this homeowner wants to retire and has a dream, and we all appreciate and support that, but we also all have a dream, and we all live in the neighborhood, and we all moved into this neighborhood because of what we have in the neighborhood, which is the dream of living in a mid-century modern specific street and neighborhood. I have so many snippets from letters, but I don't think I have enough time, so will the copies I have here enough, or would you like me to read some snippets?
If you want to summarize some of the letters, or?
Well, the strong opposition. This is from. Oops. This is from Stefan and William Rouse. We just learned that 252 Sunset might be demolished. We are opposed to the demolition. The architecture of Sunrise Park and its Alexanders and Meiselman homes is the reason why Bill and I bought our home just a few blocks away. Unfortunately, we're out of town and cannot attend the hearing on such short notice. This is, well, I've many more examples. I'm running out of time, but you understand the importance of us putting a halt on this, at least for now, and do a little bit more of a study on this. So thank you for listening.
All right, thank you very much.
Good morning.
Just excuse me just one second. All right, thank you very much. Please.
Sure. Good morning. My name is Charlie Lamort. I live at 294 Sunset Way, 5 doors from the proposed 252 demolition. First thing I want to say is I think all of us have this book at our home, and it is the Alexanders, and the important thing is A Desert Legacy. And if you look on the back page, which I've provided to you, it shows that Enchanted Homes and Sunmore were designated as a unique, cohesive group of Alexander homes, which is represented by this book. And I want to tell you also, living on the street, the magical thing about Sunset Way is that it is lined with quintessential mid-century homes on both sides of the street. It looks like the 50s and the 60s, but all dressed up. As a whole, the entire neighborhood is a step back in history, and that's why thousands of people come to look at it every year. So in my opinion, an expanded remodel would most benefit the street and the city. And I'd also like to talk a little bit about the procedure. We just learned about this on Thursday. City Hall is closed Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so we only had a few days to get people together so that they would know that this is happening. So I'm wondering if a rule change could be made so that houses which are designated 3, which now do not need to have a notification if they're going to be demolished, also that we can be notified by law whenever these are going to happen in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Jim Harlan. I'm the author of the Alexander Desert Legacy Journal. I'll repeat some of the themes that are being spoken about here. One is, I believe demolition of this home would create a scar, a permanent scar in the neighborhood. There are 141 homes in this neighborhood, all designed by, at least the floor plan, by Bill Kreisel. And this information is based on my research of Getty files, city permits, and tax assessor rolls. I disagree with some of the reports that have been written. I believe that adding a garage door does not ruin a home's integrity. And I think I'll leave it at that. I'm very much against the demolition of the home. I think it's we're at a precarious point here. The demolition of an Alexander in an intact neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harlan. Good morning.
Good morning, HSPB. I'm Chris Bale. I live in Sunrise Park. I'm about 4 blocks away from where this proposed demolition is to occur. But I live on a street, Belding, where last year a house at 2033 East Belding, perfectly decent ranch-style mid-century home, was torn down and replaced with a property that was, I don't know how much bigger, but it went from a 3-bedroom, 2-bath to a 4-bedroom, 4-bath. And that part of Sunrise Park is not Alexander homes, but it is a myriad of different mid-century homes. And I saw that happen, and I thought, okay, that house happens to be next to 2 vacant lots that were built with new homes. I have no problem with anything being built on a vacant lot because there wasn't anything there. But when you have property that has an intrinsic value because it's an Alexander, and you want to tear it down and build a facsimile of that, I have a real hard time with that. So I'm here, as with many of the others before me, to request the stay of demolition. I hope that what comes out of this, because a lot of times through adversity we gain something better, I hope that what comes out of this is a historic district for Sunmore and maybe portions of Sunrise Park. Where is the tipping point? If we let this one be torn down, because I read somewhere in there that, you know, that's not going to affect the integrity of this neighborhood that could potentially be a historic district, how many more can we tear down? This is like the vacation rental issue where people were saying, well, we should limit, you know, the numbers of them that there are based on streets, how many per street. How many can we tear down per street before we ruin this neighborhood? I think that the answer is actually 0. So I hope that you guys take that into account and think about that when you make your decision. And again, I'm requesting the stay of demolition. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Good morning.
Morning, sir. My name is Lee Wilson Jr. I teach world and U.S. history at Cathedral City High School, and I live in Sunrise Park at 223 North Monterey Road. And I heard about this meeting last week via Facebook, and thank you very much for the heads up. I'm opposed to tearing down the house, mainly because the house on 252 Sunset looks exactly like mine on 223 North Monterey, and I'm very proud of my house. I've taken care of it, invested a lot of money in it, and in addition, my house has been in the Atomic Ranch book, the magazine. It was in a Better Homes and Gardens special edition on Mid-Century, and then just most recently, my house was shown on House Hunters as 2 guys came from LA and they wanted a fabulous mid-century with curb appeal and pedigree. And I thought, wow. And then when I saw that the house that they're getting ready to tear down is just like mine, I was like, oh my God, there's, you know, like, that's just a real buzzkill, kind of a stab in the back. I understand people would want to, you know, you own your own property, you have the right to do with your own stuff, but Alexander Chrysler type house is something special. And I'm, as a resident in Sunrise Park, I'm just opposed to it. I wish the people that own the house the best of luck, though. I think, you know, it's an uncomfortable position for them to be in, but save the house. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Karen Taba, and I'm a realtor. I don't really have a dog in the race here. I don't live at Sunrise Park. But if I sold this house and I can't make a disclosure to the buyer saying that you cannot do anything to this house, like there are several around that you have to make this disclosure that you can't touch the outside, you can do whatever you want inside, and you have to go and check with the city to see what you can do. You know, we need to have some sort of a disclosure for the realtors, because if I had sold that house to them and they said, well, I think I'm going to demolish it and build something similar but new, I have nothing to say. I mean, it's your house, you can live in it, you can, it's a property right. So I'm just asking that if this commission has anything to say about other neighborhoods also, not just this neighborhood, I just see a real problem here. So I just want you to keep that in the back of your mind, because we need some disclosures if this is going to happen over and over again. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Jade Nelson, board member of Palm Springs Modern Committee, and here on their behalf. I would like to present newly relevant information about Sunset Way, including a May 1958 Desert Sun article about, quote, a gala open house where George Alexander introduced a second section of his enchanted home development just north of McCallum Way, now Talkwood, on Sunset Way. The new group of houses will extend east from Sunset to join the present community of enchanted homes east and west of Luella Road. These new homes are designed by the prominent architect Richard Leach, AIA, with color coordination by C. Tony Pereira. Richard Leach also designed the award-winning Tierra del Sol near Thunderbird, as well as the original clubhouse of Indian Wells Country Club, making him an architect of local significance. He was born in Glendale, California on February 3, 1922. Following service in World War II as a first lieutenant in the United States Air Force, he graduated from USC School of Architecture in 1952 and became a member of AIA Orange County. He secured a job as designer for Smith & Williams prior to launching Leach & Rudolph in 1953. He later started his own firm, Richard Leach International, Architects and Land Planners, which specialized in large master planned housing developments throughout the U.S. In retirement, he developed an interest in ancient Japanese country houses and worked on modern adaptations of artisan-built homes from the Middle Ages. Leach returned to USC as an instructor and secured his FAIA nomination in 1972. To paraphrase Chris Menrad, president of PS Modcom and co-author of William Chrysler's Palm Springs book, there are good houses with history and design here. It would be a shame to start a trend of ripping them down to build bigger homes. It will eventually destroy the integrity of the neighborhood. In the book, the enchanted homes was not discussed because Chrysler really had very little to do with them. Floor plans were lifted from the Ramon Rise project that he walked away from, and the Alexander Construction Company then reused them when taking over Sunmore from the bankrupt developer Bob Higgins, for whom Wexler and Harrison did the first design. The Alexanders then hired Leach to do the elevation. So when you buy in Sunmore Estates, you get 3 names for the price of 1 home. Now I am going to go over my 3 minutes, but just give me a few extra seconds. In conclusion, PS Modcom believes the 200 block of Sunset Way, being a main access point for the neighborhood, does set the tone for the enchanted home tract, and is arguably more unique because it was by a different architect than most Alexander homes. Many of the houses within this block retain a high level of integrity, unlike the 300-400 block, where some of the dwellings have been significantly altered or designed by others. Currently, the east side of the 200 block seems especially cohesive, so keeping this house from being demolished is important to further maintaining the overall integrity of the neighborhood as originally envisioned and intended. Thank you. And I've attached the article, and there's a copy here for each one of you.
Mr. Nelson, we do have it in our package.
Fantastic.
All right, thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak this morning, please?
Hi, my name is Rob Reinhardt. I live on Sunset Way as well. And I'm opposed to the demolition of 252 Sunset Way for all the same reasons that everyone else spoke today. I think that that block in particular is uniquely qualified, as every single home on that block is historically significant, and I think that it would be a shame to get rid of one of these, and also set a dangerous precedent that that this could happen again in other parts of the neighborhood or in other homes on the street. I think, just as for a little history, my partner and I looked at many neighborhoods and homes before we purchased in Sunrise Park. We settled in the neighborhood precisely for its mid-century heritage and the near pristine maintenance of its efficient, unobtrusive, low-profile homes. Until very recently, the people who have bought in Sunrise Park have had an appreciation for mid-century architecture and the unique heritage of the neighborhood. Also, until recently, the neighborhood has improved dramatically as new residents have committed themselves to the stewardship of their historically significant homes through the restoration and modernization of their existing structures. They honor both the homes and the neighborhood's provenance and character. What seems to be happening now in Sunrise Park at an alarmingly quick pace is a relaxed disposition of demolition permits and approval of home designs using a generic one-size-fits-all building code, with no consideration to how the size and scale of these homes will affect the environments in which they insert themselves. The new homes built or under construction in the neighborhood in the last 2 years completely overwhelm their lots, the homes around them, and they invade neighbors' sense of privacy. I know firsthand, as my property backs up a post office-sized 18-foot tall box currently under construction that takes up almost the entire 14,000 square foot lot. The mid-century aesthetic is essentially Palm Springs' brand. It's what's driven the city's recent revival. It's why 100,000 people show up every year, filling the hotels and restaurants with tourist revenue, and it's why 800 people visited this past Modernism Week in Sunrise Park alone. Allowing the obliteration of a perfectly fine, habitable Alexander home on a block uniquely made up entirely of these historically significant mid-century homes sends a message to the community that the city has no real appreciation or incentive to maintain its heritage. It sets a dangerous precedent, opening the way for developers to buy other mid-century homes, scrap them and build homes ill-suited for the neighborhood. It threatens to radically change the charm of Palm Springs and its mid-century neighborhoods. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Please, good morning.
My name is Rick Berg. I live in the Enchanted Homes section of Sunmore and serve on the board of the Sunmore Neighborhood Organization. I'm opposed to the demolition of 252 North Sunset. This is a significant mid-century home in a concentration of mid-century homes that is one of the largest tracts of such buildings in Palm Springs and very possibly anywhere. I strongly believe that this concentration of mid-century homes should be organized and recognized as a historic district. In fact, I obtained an application yesterday morning to initiate that project after learning of this demolition application. This neighborhood is 60 years old, irreplaceable, and invaluable. Please grant a stay on the demolition of this home. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to address the board this morning? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment.
Mr. Chair, request, can we take a few-minute break? I'd like to see the drawings that were presented as part of public comment.
All right, I'm just wondering if we shouldn't do that right at the item number 4 on the agenda?
Okay, fine.
Okay. All right, so moving on to the agenda, item number 1 on the agenda is our consent calendar. It's the approval of the minutes of May 9th, 2017 and June 13 of 2017. Board, let's begin with the minutes of May 9th, please. Any comments, edits, or changes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Okay.
Second.
Second, okay. I do have some changes. We have a first and a second. Both Mr. Jade Nelson and Steve Kalon at the May 9th meeting spoke in opposition of the demolition of the bank building. I think that we need to call out with a little more definition which bank building they're talking about there. And then on under item 4B, page 6 of I think that's page 5 of 8. I'm sorry, I don't see it that well. I actually commented on, I asked for clarification of noticing of the agenda for this item. Staff member Lyon noted it is routine for agendas to be distributed to adjacent neighborhood organizations within a half-mile of the project site. I just want to note that during today's meeting, I want to bring up the notification issue and get more clarification. It's come up several times during our public comment this morning, so I just want to make that note that I'll be addressing that a little later. Under those same minutes of May 9th, and again, I apologize, I think this is page 3 of 8. Again, my comments being noted. Chair Johns noted other sites have been designated that were more deteriorated than this one. Do you see that, Ken?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to note that I did mention specifically La Serena Villas, and so I think it's important to reference the site that was more deteriorated than this one for our minutes.
So noted.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else edits on questions on that one? Okay, we have a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All righty. Moving on to the June 13th minutes. Any questions or edits or changes?
Mr. Chair, I believe I was absent.
Say it again.
I was absent, I believe.
Okay, thank you. Before I take a motion?
I have one edit.
All right, let's start. Okay, let's start with, all right. Dave,
Okay.
please.
Under board member comments, the first item, it was actually board member Kaiser, who discussed the book about the new house, old house.
Okay.
All right, great.
So noted.
Todd?
Also on page 4, under board member comments, under mine, with respect to the last sentence that says he noted it was a good example of a listing that would potentially, I probably said did benefit from, because that listing did have historic content in it, and so it was probably something along the lines of that did benefit, because the listing agent had emphasized benefits of historic. Well, so that seems a little bit out of context with what I would have said. So I'm not sure how to clean up that note.
Do you want to paraphrase that would help me clarify it better for you?
So it would have been, he noted that it was a good example of a listing that did benefit.
Okay.
Because the listing real estate agent emphasized, well, I mean, so he didn't really emphasize the benefits of historic preservation, but he did clearly note that it was an historic property.
Okay.
And so then I probably went on to editorialize how it would be of benefit to elaborate on how the preservation of such a property. Does that help? Okay, thank you.
All right, and Ken, I think that you've already had this brought to your attention, but on the minutes of June 13th, 2017, I'd like the record to reflect that Tracy Conrad is the newly elected president of the Palm Springs Historical Society, not the Palm Springs Preservation Foundation.
Yes, I apologize for that.
No problem. And then throughout the minutes, Mr. Eric Rosenau, Eric is with a K, not a C. Let the record reflect that.
Thank you.
All righty. I'll accept a motion to accept as changed, as edited.
So moved. So moved.
All right, first by Mr. Hayes, second by Mr. Marsh. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Aye. Anyone opposed?
Abstain.
Abstain. Mr. Lavoie abstains. All right, thank you very much. Moving on to item number 2 on our agenda, public hearings. We have none. Item number 3 on the agenda, unfinished business. We have none. Under new business 4A, an application by Kevin Vanderzayden, owner, to demolish the single-family structure located at 252 North Sunset Way, a Class 3 historic site, zoned R1C. This is case number 3.4039, MAA. Ken Lyon, staff report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As noted in your staff report, this is a request to demolish a Class 3 historic site. As you know, any site or building within the city of Palm Springs that was constructed prior to 1969 is automatically so designated. The designation allows a moment for the city and the HSPB to consider the demolition request and to take possible action to stay the demolition for up to a period of 120 days in order to further evaluate the site for possible understanding that it may possess historic significance. In this case, as much of the testimony today has already characterized, this is a home that was developed by the Alexander Construction Company in 1958 as part of the larger tract entitled or named Enchanted Homes, which was a subpart of the subdivision originally called Sunmore, developed under the by the developer of A.F. Simon. Probably the largest issue that I've encountered in writing this staff report was the interesting background that I was bumping into with respect to the architect. And as many different people in the public have mentioned today, the original area of Sunmore was attributed to Wexler and Harrison as the architects of record. As noted in the Alexander Tribute Journal by PSBF, the Ramon Rise floor plan that appears to be the floor plan used in this home was developed by Bill Kreisel, but as noted in the material that was the subsequent material that I gave you, as well as by the member of the public, Jade Nelson, the home in a newspaper article was reported by Bob Alexander himself as being by the architect Richard Leach. In the material that I gave you, I also provided a copy of the article that Jade provided, and I provided a small article that was some information I found on the web yesterday regarding this architect. The discussion that I've focused on in the staff report is the material that came out of the draft citywide historic resource survey, in which they identify, as many of the people in the public have noted, there is a significant concentration of homes in this particular neighborhood. And I want to just call to your attention the appendix that is attached to your staff report on this particular topic, in which I gave some further explanation of the discussion of historic resource contributing element and the statuses of these items. The reason in the staff report that we've identified that this particular home is recommended for you to take no action is recognizing that there is still a significant concentration of contributing, or what appear to be contributing, elements to this area. As noted in the staff report, and as has been the discussion today, this area is not a historic district currently, and the home is not currently designated as a historic site. The options that could be considered by the board, and many of the people in the public have talked about the quote-unquote opposing the demolition, the action that the board has here is somewhat limited. The action of taking a stay of demolition, which can be made up to 120 days, or can be any time period that the board may choose to further help itself understand the significance of this particular site, is really the option that you have. We typically do not bring in the new floor plans for the project that's being proposed. In this case, there is a project proposed for the site. In some cases in the past, the board has struggled with demolition requests in which there is no application for a replacement structure. In this case, we do have an application in progress for a replacement home, a single-family residence that is slightly larger than the current home. The board's actions do not include evaluation of that new structure. It really is limited to the question on whether the board feels it has adequate evidence in this particular home to take any action. And that's the basis upon which we had written the staff report, is noting that as the public have also identified, there are a considerable number of buildings in this neighborhood that could be contributing if the area were to be considered for a possible historic district. And because of that, we identified that this home obviously is potentially contributing, but enough still would remain in the neighborhood for its integrity to be intact. That concludes my staff report. We're recommending that the board take no action and allow the applicant to demolish the home. And we're available to answer any questions you may have. And as you know, the applicant is also here if you have further questions of him. Thank you.
All right, Ken, thank you very much. Given that the new structure being proposed is not within our purview, Mr. Lavoie did request an opportunity to review those plans. Would that still be appropriate?
Of course.
Okay. Then, Bill, please, if you wouldn't mind. For those members of the audience, Bill is our one of our resident architects on the board, and so his review of that might be interesting. Bill, with your permission, we'll go and continue our discussion. Okay. Any questions of staff?
Just have questions.
Okay. I have a couple of questions, Ken, and I really do appreciate the staff report and the clarification, because as I read the staff report, I kept coming across in the conclusion of the staff report, the subject dwelling is not a historic resource. I saw later in that same paragraph, it was listed in the 2015 citywide survey as appearing to be contributing. It went on to say it appears to be an area eligible as a historic district. So I kept seeing some conflict there, so I do really appreciate your clarification on that. One of the questions that I have for you today, and it came up several times during public comment, what is the city's rule, if you will, on notification? As I understand it, we have a 500-foot rule of notification if a home is being considered as a historic site. But there is no notification if a home is being scheduled or being requested for demolition. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. As noted in the last page of your staff report, any matter that is brought before the City Board or Commission, particularly those within which we work within the Planning Department, which is the AAC, the HSPB, the Planning Commission, and City Council, those items are required to have a 500-foot radius map provided in the staff report that shows what properties are within the 500-foot limit of the subject property. Also, per the city's ordinance, neighborhood organizations within a half-mile radius of a project site to be considered are provided email notification of the agendas when the agendas go out. Now, the agendas go out for your meeting on the Thursday prior. So usually by the end of the day on Thursday prior to your Tuesday meeting, those agendas have been posted on the city's website, and those emails are distributed to the neighborhood organizations that are listed in the half-mile radius. The recent practice of the planning department has been to send those emails both to the primary contact person for that neighborhood organization that we have listed through the Office of Neighborhood Relations, as well as the second or co-chair of those neighborhood organizations. I believe, I have not seen the noticing labels for this particular one, but I believe the emails went out to both the primary contact and the secondary contact for the neighborhood organizations that are within a half-mile radius of this particular site. But any site that comes before a city board or commission of this nature does go out through email notification of the agendas to those that are within a half-mile radius of the site.
I thank you for that. So again, just so I'm clear, if a home is being considered as a historic site or being considered for a demolition, the notification is the same?
Not necessarily. When you have a public hearing, which this particular item is not, and the city ordinances define which items are to be handled as public hearing items and which items are to be handled as a matter of business of the board. But if it's an item that is a public hearing item, then those property owners that are within that 500-foot radius of the subject property are actually provided written notice, and there's also written notice provided in the newspaper on those particular items. So there are two kinds of notification on projects that are considered by any board or commission. When they are public hearing items, there are additional written mailings that do go out.
To belabor the subject, it seems to me that something that brought this number of people into the audience today should have been a public hearing, so that notification would have been more extensive. A number of people spoke today about late notification, only learning about this on Thursday. This proposed demolition of this house affects a great many people. For my next door neighbor who is not on email, for her to not be notified of something seems to me to be a disservice to that particular member of the community. This is probably a bigger question than we should deal with here, and that's why I made that note earlier to discuss the 500-foot notification. So I'd like just a little further clarification on this particular situation as to an application to demolish a single-family structure does not qualify for a public hearing?
That's correct. It would be similar to major architectural applications. There are a number of different kind of applications that do not require public hearing notices. So a major architectural application could be something as large as an entire subdivision of new homes, or it could be as large as a major shopping center. Those types of projects are also not required to be public hearing items. The city does, though, however, do those notifications, as I mentioned earlier, on those types of cases.
To further, the number of the members of the public that are here today versus it not being a public hearing. I think I would really like to discuss this further perhaps at the end of the meeting, but those are my comments for now. Board? Or questions for now?
I actually do. Oh, sorry.
So,
go ahead.
So could we, however, if we were to put a stay on the demo today, then would this not qualify, if I think I'm correct, for a public hearing? If the board today would put a stay of demolition, then would that not trigger automatically a public hearing?
No. Your action today would complete the action at the moment of this particular item. You would be staying this potential demolition for some purpose. Normally, the board stays a demolition in order for it to initiate study. The board could initiate a stay in order for the neighborhood to initiate a study or submit an application. The board could also initiate the stay if there was a dialogue that were to occur between the owner and the board over some alternative approach. So the stays generally are done to enable time or to put in place a pause so that some other additional information can be provided. As I say, normally you guys are putting stays on things in order to actually initiate study. This may be one of those where you are initiating, if you choose to, a stay that might allow the neighborhood organization to submit an application. This could be a stay in which you might seek additional information from a property owner, or you may choose to put no stay on it. The point at which a stay could lead to an item being a public hearing is if it comes back to the board in such a way that the board requests a public hearing in order to actually consider a potential recommendation for historic site designation or historic district designation. Does that make sense?
I sort of feel like we're in a vice. I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate your explanation. But again, I know my 4 years on the board, I don't think I've seen, going back to what Gary was making mention of, such an immediate response that just happened through it without any notification. So imagine if there was a notification that went out, could be even a larger audience. It's just that this is such a sensitive matter. I mean, this is just an example, and it's just key to what this town's all about. And you know, we wouldn't be having Modernism Week if we just continued to have these kinds of things, just like, okay, let's just tear it down. So I feel we have to do something. Anyway, I'll let somebody else speak for a moment.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Todd, please.
So I do have a question. We keep lumping together Sunmore and Enchanted Homes, and I understand that Sunmore, when it was originally laid out, included this entire block tract of land. But what actually happened is Sunmore Estates was developed. That was changed and sold, and then the Alexanders came in and then developed Enchanted Homes. And Enchanted Homes was developed as in 3 separate phases. So if you look at the back page of this, it basically lays that out where it has the boundary tract for Sunmore, and then it has the boundary tract for Enchanted Homes. And so I think part of my confusion is, why are we lumping them together when they're 2 really separate tracts? And my confusion leads to concern, because if in the eventuality that either Sunmore or Enchanted does indeed want to become an historic district, they're required to have 2/3 contributing structures in that district in order to get that historic designation. If you're looking at, which I believe is accurate, just Enchanted Homes by itself, and you remove Sunmore from the equation, they've already lost 32 of those structures, so they are no longer contributing, and they are right at the cusp of not having 2/3 to being able to be named an historic district, taking out the Sunmore homes. So I guess losing one more home could indeed in the future preclude them from being able to become an historic district. So losing even one home now does become of even greater significance than just losing that one home by itself. So I guess the question is, why are we including Sunmore in the discussion and not just the Enchanted Homes?
The information that you see with respect to the proposed area that appears to be eligible as a historic district was identified by Historic Resources Group out of Pasadena, who did the citywide historic resource survey.
Right.
So there is no magic about what the boundaries of any particular historic district could or might be.
Right.
This is simply one that the consultant, as they did their citywide reconnaissance survey, found was a reasonable concentration of resources that could potentially be identified as a historic district. Could they be separate? Yes, they could. Could one be Enchanted Homes as a historic district and one be Sunmore? Yes, it could. The 2/3 comment that you mentioned is not part of our ordinance. So while it is a good rule of thumb, and our ordinance refers to a significant concentration of historic resources, the 2/3 rule that you mentioned is not one that our particular ordinance requires.
Okay.
But that's the reason why this particular area was identified.
Okay, thanks.
All right, let's go to Mr. Marsh, please.
A couple of questions. One is there was a prior case where we considered demolition, and I had asked a question about, in Palm Springs, is the demolition permit tied to the permit for new construction? I don't think the ordinance does that. Other cities have that kind of provision. But is that the case?
Yes, a demo permit could be issued without a new construction permit being applied for.
Which means that if a new home were to be constructed and somehow through a variety of reasons they weren't able to build the home, we end up with a demolished site and a vacant lot, which is not a good thing in itself.
And you're correct, Mr. Marsh. One of the things that the board has discussed previously, prior to you being a member of the board, is to discuss changes to the city's demolition policy. Member Burkett brings this up on a regular basis, reminding me of my assignment to continue forward with that. As we look at larger changes to our historic preservation ordinance, we'll also look at that as part of them. But we have noted that as being a concern of the board, and we will continue to work on that.
I'm kind of struck by this whole hearing. Staff has indicated that we're not really in a public hearing, that somehow we're doing a hearing to address the concerns of neighbors. I wonder, did the Office of the Neighborhoods in part influence the planning department to conduct a hearing on this proposed demolition in light of the fact that there appears to be controversy from the neighborhood? And I'm amazed, I'm flabbergasted that between Thursday and today, all these people are here to oppose the demolition, primarily oppose the demolition. So I guess I need more clarification about what constitutes a public hearing, particularly related to a demolition permit.
Let me just say that the item that you have on your agenda today is the standard practice for demolition permits of Class 3 structures. As board members can attest, we've had quite a number of these in the past. We follow the same procedures for this type of application every time. Mr. Lyon has already described the process for notifying the neighborhoods, et cetera. But it is not a public hearing item. The code does not specify it as being a public hearing item. So this is the opportunity for the board to review a proposed demolition of a Class 3 structure and make a determination of either no action or possibility of further study of the item. So again, this is a standard application and procedure for a demolition permit of a Class 3 structure.
Okay. Our information indicates that this is a potential contributory structure to a potential historic district based on a reconnaissance survey work of a couple of years ago. I gather from the information here and the site, et cetera, that this, because there are, well, I can't say that, but it would appear that this is not a Class 1 site, so the neighborhood could not initiate a Class 1 designation for this particular structure, but it might be a contributory structure to a district if a district were proposed. So we're somewhat of a quandary to take no action on a structure that may contribute to a future historic district.
And that's an important thing for you all to consider in your deliberations today, based on the information that you have relative to the 2015 survey that was conducted. One of the things I might just offer to you is that where you have tracts of homes, in this case tract homes, doing an individual case-by-case designation really isn't the best way to approach the overall neighborhood. That looking at a district, designating a district, perhaps is a better way to do it. If you look at the Bungalow Heaven in Pasadena, for example, a landmark district and now on the National Register as well, where you have a collection of over 800 homes that were built from the same approximate time period, that they're not individually designated per se, but rather they've designated a district. And through that process, you look at not only demolition permits within the boundaries of that district, but you also look at changes to the contributing structures as well. And you also look, based on our ordinance, at non-contributing structures. So in terms of an approach, you know, I would argue against going on a case-by-case basis where you have a large tract of homes, that going the route of a historic district would be a better way to look at the overall preservation of the neighborhood.
No questions.
Any further questions of staff? Okay, I have one more question. During the applicant's representative, he again described the property as being 1,500 and some square feet, and that the proposed project was going to be 2,100. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact figures here. But as the staff report indicates, it is actually a 1,258 square foot home, as are many of the homes in the neighborhood. So going from 1,258 square feet to 2,100 square feet or 2,200 square feet, that, if my math is somewhat correct, adding approximately 1,000 square feet to the lot. And are there other homes in this neighborhood of that much larger size homes that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of, Mr. Chair. I would call to your attention within your packet on the issue of what is the square footage we're talking about. The last building permit is the original building permit for this home. It's a bit hard to read, but there you see that it's basically, I think it's 1,285, and the garages or carport is listed at, I think, 346. That's how the applicant's representative is getting to this number of around 1,500.
Understood.
But
Okay.
I have not done an inventory of the sizes of the homes in this particular neighborhood that have been modified, obviously.
Okay. Thank you, Ken. Any further questions of staff at this time? Okay, great. Board deliberation.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Lavoie.
We are party as a board to information of the survey. intimately involved in that whole very long process. The city council has yet to adopt that survey, I believe. So that document has not become public knowledge yet. However, that document gives us information and identifies certain structures as contributing, non-contributing, and a discussion of the reasons why. It identifies certain neighborhoods as being potentially historic. This structure and this neighborhood are among them. And unfortunately, this city doesn't really understand what an historic district is. We only have one. And even the city council admitted that they weren't quite sure what it meant the other day. And so we have work to do, I think. This brings up sort of like an issue. Do you allow change in an historic district? If we know it's a potential historic district, we have the documentation identifying it. It would give us reason to issue a stay of demolition so that we can do further research into just what that means. And we have heard from the neighbors that they wish to come forward with a designation of the neighborhood. That is reason to issue a stay of demolition. If that process continues, I think it's very important, having dealt with historic districts in other places, that you not only identify architects and developers, but you talk about size, bulk, and scale, that you talk about land use patterns, ground coverage, that you talk about roof slopes in this particular neighborhood. I did a drive-by yesterday, and all of these houses just seem to hug the ground. The roof slopes are barely 2 and 12. I mean, and it's a neighborhood characteristic that to me is very obvious, which made me want to see that drawing up close. There are certain patterns very clearly. Yeah, there's some variation in each house, but there is a pattern of use of materials and decorative elements that are quintessential mid-century. And there's a nice variation in all the different houses. And some have been modified, but all of it restorable. Even the garage door on this and the god-awful electric thing that someone stuck on the side is all reversible in preservation terms. So I would urge that we take an action to stay a demolition for sufficient period for the pursuit of a designation of the neighborhood and identifying this particular structure as contributing. And as Palm Springs identifies historic districts, it does allow, our current ordinance does allow new buildings and changes to buildings if they are consistent with the guidelines. Thank you.
Mr. Lavoie, thank you. Comments? Discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Lavoie, is that would you make that a motion, please?
I so move.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. So in the discussion here, Mr. Lavoie, in initiating a stay of demolition, which would enact a further study, so as the staff pointed out to us, we have the board can initiate a further study, the neighborhood can initiate a further study, or an individual can initiate a study. Do I have that correct?
Correct.
Which do you prefer as a part of your motion?
Staff's looking at me.
What else are you doing tomorrow? I didn't actually hear it.
In that we have representatives of several community groups passionate about mid-century, and we have a neighborhood group. I would hope that they could combine their efforts and their expertise to produce that document.
Okay, so my question of staff would be, is if we have a motion to put a stay of demolition on this, and we haven't quite discussed the length of that demolition yet, with tasking the neighborhood to come forward with the study, in the event they did not, what recourse does this board have? I think we, as the board, if we enact the study, there's more teeth to it. It would happen.
Well, that's debatable, I guess. I think there's pros and cons to either approach. If the board initiates the study, it becomes a study and a project that the city has initiated. It's going to be that, at that point, a study that the city imposes with a recommendation from the board to the city council on the neighborhood. It's simply my opinion that if the board encourages the neighborhood to make this submission, I believe you will have a significantly better buy-in by the individual homeowners in that neighborhood, because I think they will be a vested part of that consideration. And I think what you've seen with the 5 other historic district applications that have come in, they've been made by those neighborhoods. And I think there's value to that, because for a neighborhood to come together to the degree that you're seeing here is pretty considerable when the notification that was made was last Thursday. And there's clearly a large number of people in this neighborhood, at least by way of these public comment letters, that see this as a potential area for them to consider. But I think that the neighborhood needs perhaps some public outreach from staff, maybe at their neighborhood meetings or something else, to help them understand the implications of possibly pursuing historic designation as a district. I had some conversation with a couple of members of the neighborhood organization yesterday morning about this matter, and it's something that the neighborhood has an opportunity. It's also something that represents a responsibility of the neighborhood, and it also represents financial incentives for those that are contributing properties within a historic district as being eligible for a Mills Act contract, which could potentially reduce their property taxes. Having said all this, you see that the gist of where my brain goes is I think that the neighborhood is best suited to bring this forward to the board. And I think that in that way, they can work with themselves to help understand what it means, how they want to build it, how they want to set the parameters of it, and ultimately what they would be willing to then support. Because ultimately what the board would do would be to bring out a consultant, which we've done in the past, and pull together a set of recommendations for you to consider. And then, as you know, your action would be to make a recommendation to the city council. So ultimately, just as with Class 1 historic sites, historic districts are a recommendation by the board with a decision by the city council. Does that help?
It does.
Let me offer this as well. Based on the 2015 study by Historic Resources Group, in terms of the actual neighborhood, what could be contributing, what is designated as non-contributing, 75% of that work is already completed through the study that the city commissioned itself. Really, the other part of that, as Mr. Lyon has indicated, is outreach on the part of the neighborhood organization to the property owners within the neighborhood to help them understand what designation means to them, and staff would certainly offer that support to the neighborhood organization in meeting with them and the neighborhood group to go through the explanation of that process. But again, in terms of the information that's necessary to make a determination of whether or not this qualifies as a historic district, 75% of the work is already done.
Okay. Mr. Gazan, would you mind coming back up to the microphone, please? And just for my own clarification, you're the president of the Homeowners Association. Please Clarify that for me.
I'm the chairman of the board for the Sunmore Neighborhood Group. We are not an HOA. It is part of the 1PS group of neighborhoods.
Okay. And are you confident today representing the majority of the homeowners?
I'm confident, however, we haven't had the time to reach out to our neighborhood as a whole to see if this is, in fact, something that we want to pursue. We did pull paperwork yesterday from the planning department. We are having a board meeting on next Tuesday, and it is an agenda item, and the neighbors have been alerted to that agenda.
Mr. Kazan, please repeat what you just said. You pulled certain paperwork yesterday?
We did we're given the application to fill out to become a historic district.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lavoie, your motion, would you like to restate that, please, given the information we have?
What do you want from me, timing? Knowing how fast government works, I would put a time limit of 6 months.
Okay, and task the neighborhood.
Task the neighborhood, working with staff to produce this document.
Okay, so that's our first.
If I may, Mr.
Please.
Chair, the maximum allowable stay you may place at this time is 120 days.
Right, that's what you meant.
No. If that's what the law says, then 120 days.
Okay, so we have a first, and is the board clear on what the first is?
I have a question then,
Please.
staff. So they have 120 days to submit that document to the city, not adoption of that document. Am I correct?
Repeat your question.
Okay. If we have a stay of demolition for 120 days, that means that the public has 120 days to submit the designating document, not adoption by the city council.
No, the latter. The stay would conclude at the end of 120 days. The ordinance allows for an additional extension of the stay up to 180 days.
Okay.
But that is the maximum. And so if either the board or the city or the community, the neighborhood, wishes to pursue a historic district application and get it to the city council for consideration, that needs to happen within that time frame.
Understood. Okay, 120 days.
Okay, so we have a first, and we're all clear on what the first is?
Yep.
Okay. Did you make the second? Yeah. Okay, and so we do have the second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So be it. Thank you very much, everyone,
And
for
just
coming.
to let you know, this matter is appealable under section 2.05 of the municipal code. So.
Understood. So did you, the members of the community, did you hear that it is appealable to the council? Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to call a quick 5-minute recess, please. I have to warm up.
I know. I was thinking the same thing. I'm sitting there shivering. Just like.
I'm going to ask. What's that? guys are starting.
Hi, Kathy. A few minutes later today to talk about this thing, Topwoods Canyon.
Oh, yeah.
Because I want to understand it a little better. I'm just curious. I know. That's what I want to understand. I'm just here as a friend. No. My friend lives down the street. Yes. So and I love that little neighborhood because my dog walks with his dogs. I know it really well.
I was going to say this, but I didn't. So, that's unfortunate.
Because nobody's done it. I know.
This is not known for historic preservation.
And I think people need to organize themselves to do it. Oh, it just completely organizes the neighborhoods.
We don't want to slow down.
No, we had to come back and still had to do Pelican. I figured I would. Well, you can do the house chores and I can go to meetings. Ruby went to daycare.
Well, I had this little episode this morning.
So we
actually learned.
I can't figure it out. Well, I can leave her in the house, but she's around. So, I mean, I can't even take her on good walks. I mean, I won't take her on a good walk. When I get outside, it's like 100 degrees at 7 o'clock.
We actually live in a live exhibit, and losing those pieces is like systems. There's plenty of other benefits. Who cares? We lost one.
This is half of James.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's Jim.
That car has no purpose, air conditioning sucks, still uses regular gas.
Interesting.
New to the city? Yes. I'm Denise Wolfe, Office of Neighborhood Manager. Sorry, I got cold hands. I'm freezing. Hi, nice to meet you. You're on the planning commission. Yes, I recognize your name. Oh, really? This is a good one. Yeah, I know. It's going to be great. Okay, that'd be great. I wish you could come and talk to one of us. Our last meeting before the summer break is Thursday. And I was like, yeah, maybe I can work something out and maybe you guys can talk about it at some point. But yeah, it's interesting. Oh, yeah, it's a good idea. What are you doing?
The day after tomorrow?
Oh my God.
I'll talk to the chair and see if he's, I think he already made the agenda.
Wow. Yeah, you're going to apply so many.
There's 13.
I went to Omaha.
Usually. Okay, yeah, I know that one. That one, yeah, that one.
Council Bluffs. It's like about, sure, I gotta talk to somebody. Again, because I think
Okay. Before I get reconvene or before I get going. The four of us are here, so we can't.
nice meeting you too, thanks. Oh, she's great, okay. Oh, I love that.
So did you put me under a vent so that it's topless?
Yeah. Well, I think I have one.
We have it.
Now, are we dark in August?
Yes.
Okay, so we're dark August.
Yeah.
So we won't reconvene until September.
Right. Back in City Hall.
And I believe we're back in City Hall in September.
Yeah.
Okay.
Could we reconvene outside?
Could we really meeting outside?
Oh.
Unbelievably cold.
Yeah, you're supposed to be inside.
I thought I was the only one. It's like, is nobody else like freezing?
I thought my voice was almost chattering there for a
I was
minute.
like starting to, I was like shaking. It was so cold. Yeah.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to reconvene the meeting, so if you are preparing to leave the room, please do so now. Thank you very much. Alrighty, we have reconvened. Having finished our new business, item 4A on the agenda, we'll move to item 5, discussions. And we have 5A, updates on historic resources surveys, HSPB number 10, the Oasis Hotel Dining Room, HSPB number 108, the Steve McQueen Residence, and HSPB number 109, Crocker Citizens National Bank. Staff.
Mr. Chair, there was a request from the board to have an update on the status of these various reports. And what I can tell you at this time is that these three initiatives have the professional services consultant under contract, and we will begin scheduling their time out to Palm Springs on these various sites in the coming days. I've had conversations with the professional consultants on each one of them, and the only thing that has been keeping me from getting them a specific schedule is my own schedule, which is a little bit busy right now. But they are all in progress, and as soon as we have the reports ready, we will be bringing them back to the board for consideration, and then to request the typical site visits and the initiation of a public hearing.
Alrighty, that's it? That's it? Okay. I think on a, and I'll forgive it, I think that we did request a ongoing update on the Cornelia White because it just is.
It's just there. I understand. Staff member Franco is here to actually give a brief update on the City Council dais, and he may be able to give us an update on Cornelia White. I'm not aware of any current new action on Cornelia White, but I've not had a chance to talk with Franco about that. So maybe when he comes up to briefly share with you the progress on the council dais, he can share with you any new information he has on Cornelia White.
All right, thank you so much. And if that's not the case, we're dark in August, yes. And when we reconvene in September, can we put it on our agenda that we can get some official update on the Cornelia White?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Franco, good morning. I think they turned the air off.
Yes. At least it's not blowing smoke. It's now just refrigerator.
Good morning, Jeff.
Frozen soft serve.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair, members of the board. If you recall, back in March 2016, the board approved a certificate of approval for the council chamber audio-video upgrade, subject to conditions for the review of material samples. Construction started in May 2017, for which the contractor has been working diligently with interior designer Jeff Duraski on furnished colored material samples for the refabrication of the dais and the staff area seating. At this time, we do have samples to present, and I'm going to pass this along to Jeff Duraski to describe the material samples in depth.
Good morning, gentlemen. How are you?
Good morning.
We, as Franco was saying, we're plowing forth, so to speak. Just to refresh your memory a little bit, the idea here is to retain a mid-century direction that Mr. Frey had initially created here in the dais interior. And so we're going ahead with the new cabinetry and workstations with the white birch material that Mr. Frey had initially used. We've made a couple of changes since to make it a little more authentic, such that instead of mitered corners, we've gone to solid wood corners that have a slight radius to them, as they were in the initial photographs. So we're creating basically a reimagining of the initial design, and that would be in the white birch. This is the control sample, and I can pass this around so you all can see it. We've had, and then this small piece is the actual finished sample that was delivered to me here for approval. This is a few iterations to get it to this point. So, and I'll pass around. There's a secondary color, which was these are dyed white birch. They are not stained. They are dyed white birch, so that we can pop the grain and enjoy the wood aspect of it. So here's the secondary color, which is the additional cabinetry that sits on top of the original, the original dais white birch. That now this is the piece that sits on top of the workstations that house the new technology, and this is a separate piece essentially that sits on top. So that's why we changed the finish work. And I remember, well, you may have all seen the original renderings and how that all integrates. So I'll send this around as well. And the green, you've seen the original control sample previously. That is a dye that matches the existing coloration on the walls and a number of areas within the council chambers. That's where that came from.
And Franco, you're bringing this material to the board as a matter of information, is that correct? Yes. This is material that they've already approved, so it's just a matter of updating?
Right.
I see.
Additionally, gentlemen, on the actual workstation surfaces is a plastic laminate. Just for durability purposes, that is this burnished bronze plastic laminate, so you're welcome to see this as well.
Where is that being used?
This is on the actual desktop surfaces.
I have a question. Is the lighting in City Hall the same as this? Or is it more like out there?
We're changing all the lamps out inside the council chambers to LED driven, and I'm not sure of the color temperature, if that's where you're going with that.
Yeah, that's where I'm going.
All right, thank you. Any questions of Franco or Jeff? Gentlemen, thank you very much. I appreciate your time coming this morning.
Thank you. And in regards to the Cornelia White House, I've seen a few emails floating around. We recently received a proposal in which we turned around a professional services agreement with the structural engineer. I believe the structural engineer is working with D.W. Johnston towards, the Cornelia White House improvements. So what the structural engineer is going to do is they're going to develop plans and I believe technical specifications. When we had Architectural Resources Group, if you recall, prepared the assessment evaluation, they've identified the proper method and means on repairing, and in their engineering quote, they did advise that there are certain structural elements that need to be reinforced and rehabilitated. And at that time, hence, we've retained this structural engineer working with D.W. Johnson to develop those actual plans and technical specs to reinforce the Cornelia White House. That's the only update that I know at this time, but I'm more than happy to return in September to give you a further update.
Well, I appreciate just that much. It gives me hope that it's in process.
Yes.
Definitely. Thank you. So if you don't mind returning in September?
No, not
okay,
at all.
Great.
All right.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, Councilmember Roberts gave a report in a recent city council meeting at the end of the meeting saying that he was working with D.W. Johnston, who was going to donate, I believe, much of the labor and materials for the project.
Yes.
And so, again, we'll request a full report in September for you.
All righty. That completes our discussion. We'll move to board member comments. Anything, board?
I have a couple of questions. Yes. Do you have an update on what's going on with the Cork and Bottle property?
What I know on the Cork and Bottle building is that the city had solicited purchase bids on it. They had a selected purchaser. They are waiting for that purchaser to come forward and enter into or open up escrow with the city. Concurrent with that, there is a development project that was submitted called the Zinc Resort. That project went through AAC once and had considerable comments from the AAC. The applicant has been spending several months reworking the design of that project, and they had advised me that they would have a revised design submitted to us mid-summer. We're approaching mid-summer, so I expect that probably toward the latter part of July, I would expect to see a revised application on the new development come in. The development that we had previously seen incorporated the facade of the Cork and Bottle with a new retail structure built behind it. I don't know what the new scheme would be, and I don't know any more about where they are in terms of opening escrow. The process of the actual escrow and purchase of the Cork and Bottle from the city to the developer is something that's handled through the Economic Development Department. I can find out more for you again by the September meeting if you'd like.
Okay, thank you. And then what's up with the orchid tree development?
On the orchid tree, they have their full entitlements for the project. The next stage is for them to obtain building permits, so we're just waiting for the developer to go forward with the building permits.
Okay, thanks.
That's it. Dick?
On the, maybe I missed it. I'm finding this application system's kind of hard for me to understand sometimes, so forgive me. But on the Crocker Bank, there was going to be an appointed source for historic resource report. I just want to see where we are with that, because we're like into the 60-day stay part of it.
That was one of the reports that I mentioned earlier. The contracts have been signed, and we're just working to get them started on their actual field work on the project.
Okay, so that will give us still time to be still within the 120 days? Okay.
Yes.
So that'll come up in September?
I think it will, either September or October.
Yeah, because isn't October the last of the May, June, July?
No, you put this stay on that one in
June.
At your June meeting, so it would be 120 days from that point.
September. Okay, we'll just be under the gun for that one. Okay. All right. Very good.
Hey, Dick, can I? Sorry. So we can extend that 120 for another 20 days? Is that what?
The ordinance allows a maximum of, I believe, 180 days.
So that 180, like when we did our one for the Sunset House, we couldn't have done it for 180. You have to do 120, and then
an extension.
And then when can we do the additional 60? Is it like the meeting before it expires, or?
Yes.
Okay, so in the case of what Dick was asking, if the Crocker Bank doesn't get resolved by October, then we can add another 60 days on to that stay?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Then it's interesting. I found in the West Hollywood Preservation Alliance group, because they've been doing some research about the demo, not issuing demo permits without plans. We've been talking about that, as you know. And in that little research I've been doing, I found the top 10 myths about historic preservation, which this would be really great for realtors, I think. And it goes through, there's 10 different things, questions and then facts and answers. I'd be happy to give this information and a link to staff if they feel it good to circulate for the other members to see. But I would like to see us pursue, as we get into the fall, we've been talking about it with the realtors to have, that meeting. And I think this would be a great thing to have. And I know it even came up in my interview last Thursday, interest by the council in realtor education as well. So I thought this would be very timely to do that. And the other thing I just wanted to mention is the National Trust for Historic Preservation. It's out there, magazine. I don't know if you're all familiar with it or not. It's like $15 to become a member of this. And they've got some great articles, this one, particularly about Neutra, the Painted Desert project that he did. So I just wanted to mention that to the gang as well. And I think maybe we want to think about maybe agendizing some more, I guess you would call it study, but the whole thing came up today about the demo and sort of the restrictions and so forth as to whether we need to have maybe a little discussion session about what changes there could be, and maybe that incorporates with what you were been talking about, Flynn. Could that, bring that all together?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we've had comments about demolition before, and as I have talked in the past, I anticipate that when the tribe finally decides on what its historic preservation policy is and how that impacts us, it will require us to do some changes to our ordinance. At that point in time, I'd like to look at it comprehensively and look at things such as how we address demolition. The idea that you brought forward today is that perhaps demolition needs to be a public hearing is something that we can certainly incorporate as part of those proposed changes and forward that on to City Council for consideration. As we talk about demolition, one of the things that we need to keep in mind is that it doesn't just impact Historic Site Preservation Board, it impacts the Building and Safety Department, so we need to get their input in that as well. So I just want you all to keep in mind, but again, as we look at comprehensive changes to our ordinance, we can include those as part of that. Also talking about public hearings and notices for those types of issues.
Right. All right. Cork and bottle, back to the cork and bottle. And I'm almost embarrassed to mention this, but because I attend AAC meetings and because I go to Planning Commission meetings, I feel like I'm a little more familiar with this project than I would otherwise be. But we saw the cork and bottle project here at the HSPB, did we not?
No. No, I don't think so.
Okay, well, if you don't think so, then we most likely did not. But what I'm recalling is that in one of those aforementioned boards or commissions, incorporating more than the facade was discussed.
That's correct. It was in the AAC meeting, and in the AAC meeting, member Sekoy Jensen had mentioned the the old Greyhound bus terminal building as being a Howard Latham design, and asked if the developer would consider incorporating that into the design of the new hotel.
Right, but I meant specifically the facade of the cork and bottle, that as opposed to just the facade, some depth of the facade be included. I don't know what that was. But again, so just so I'm remembering it, so there was some discussion about that. As this project gets redesigned, will we see it again?
Most definitely.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. All right, so then coming back to the notification, the city's policy on notification, the 500-foot rule, we've had a lot of discussion about it today. Flint, you just mentioned adjusting the ordinance once we have a little bit more clarity as what the tribe is doing, et cetera, et cetera. This turnout today was really impressive from our public. I don't recall this amount of public input, letters, given that many members of the audience today found out about it on Facebook, heard about it from a neighbor, and in my opinion, a demolition of a home in a single-family neighborhood is as important, if not more important, than the nomination of a home as a historic Class 1 site. I feel I would be more impacted by the demolition of a neighbor's home over it being designated as a Class 1. So I'd really like to stress, encourage that staff continue to keep this on the front burner so that we have a better notification policy of demolitions, Class 1s, understanding that an email went out to the leaders of the neighborhood organizations, but not everybody is on email. A large member of our population is perhaps a little older, may not be on email or checking email every day. So again, I just want to really encourage that we really look at our notification policy as we go forward. All right, thank you. Anyone else?
Mr. Chair?
Please.
I was in front of City Council for reapplication. They asked me what they could do for me, and I was like, oh.
Excellent. Yes, please share. Please share.
I told them, well, you could always support us in appeals. They hadn't heard that before. What they asked of me, though, it goes two ways, is we need to be better advocates for the public understanding what it means to be an historic district. I guess it came to a head in the recent 750 Lofts appeal, I believe the project is. And I had mentioned to them, well, you should have read our recommendations. Because I don't believe we completely supported that project and cited the guidelines, or at least I remember I didn't. And it seemed to be news to them and probably news to the public that we even have an historic district and what that means. And hearing now the public coming forward with a neighborhood district, probably our first to be actually codified. The public needs to know what that means, and so perhaps at our next year's event, that might be a significant topic of discussion, and invite the neighborhood groups and talk to them of what it means to be an historic district, and perhaps even have that discussion with the city council, so that we all understand what that means, and we're on the same page with it when we encourage neighborhoods to come forward with that designation. I mentioned some of the stuff. It's, we just produced this huge document in Santa Barbara about, you know, okay, if you're in a bungalow district, what does that mean? If you're in a Victorian district, what does that mean? What does that look like? What can you add to it? And there's a large discussion about size, bulk, and scale. And it doesn't necessarily have to match in style, but it has to be compatible and look like it belongs in the neighborhood. Which is why I was so anxious to take a look at the drawings, because I could tell from here that design did not fit Palm Springs, period, this neighborhood, secondly. Yeah, it's vaguely mid-century modern, but it's not Palm Springs. I guess I shouldn't comment on another architect's work, but anyway, it's what's appropriate in an historic district, and understanding needs to be come to and somewhat put into writing so that everyone understands where they're coming from, so that when a realtor sells a tear down, they know what can be built in that neighborhood.
I agree. And we did have the one realtor address us today, Karen. I forgot the last name. But she's right. We do need more education, more enlightenment, because there needs to be more understanding, education, disclosure. She spoke about a disclosure. That's up to another group to discuss. Bill, have you been notified that you have been reappointed?
Yes, I got a call yesterday.
Okay. And Dick, did you
that's
get
fine.
reappointed as well? Congratulations, gentlemen. I'm very happy to hear that.
Thank you.
On that note, though, 1 year ago, during the HSPB interviews, I was invited to attend and sit in on the interviews, not as an interviewer, but just to sit in and observe the interviews. Council then did ask me a few questions. Fast forward to this year, during the interviews, I was only invited to attend the interviews 2 hours prior to the interviews. I'm so sorry, I'm drawing a blank on who it actually is that called me.
Kathy Hart?
No.
Cindy Cairns? Christina Chartier?
The point
I've gone through everyone I know, Gary.
The point is that I would really very much like to have been included again. And it seems to me, whether it's the chair of this board or the AAC or whatever the other boards there are in town that have re-interviewing or processes, that maybe we just need a policy. Maybe it was Kathy Hart. Yeah, she was almost embarrassed to be calling me 2 hours prior to the meeting, prior to the interviews. So I'd like there to be maybe some clarification on who gets invited, when they get invited, and all of that, et cetera. Because I would have definitely been, I would like to have been there to both support you as you re-interviewed and those other applicants that interviewed. I don't have anything else. Any other board comments?
Just one question. I understand that the Racquet Club nomination went before the City Council. I think it was continued. Does it have to come back to our board?
We actually have to renotice the item and bring it back before the Historic Site Preservation Board. We will tentatively schedule that for the September meeting. I believe Mr. Lyon has been in contact with the property owner. The concern on the part of the City Council was that we had the incorrect address for the property owner. It was listed incorrectly in the Riverside County database. And so it was a concern that they didn't receive proper notice of the HSPB meeting, and so consequently City Council did not want to hear the item until proper notice had been given before the HSPB. So we'll bring that back in September, have a proper hearing, and we will go forward.
Okay, excellent. Anything else?
Well, with respect to the chair's question, are there new members that are coming onto this board?
Actually, there are old members who are coming onto this board. We had Mr. Lavoie and Mr. Burkett be reappointed for another term on the Historic Site Preservation Board, so we extend our congratulations to both of them.
Please, yes,
glad to have them continuing their service with us.
Excellent, excellent. All right, well, seeing no more board member comments, staff comments?
I've got a couple of items just very quickly, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Lyon. First of all, I just want to remind you that the Downtown Park meeting is going to be on July the 20th at 6 p.m. here at the Convention Center. As you're aware, the board did send a letter requesting that certain items be included in the design of the park. We'll also enter that into the record for the meeting itself, but if board members would like to attend and offer that as public comment, that would be very helpful, I think. And so again, that is on July the 20th. Also, with now the reappointment of our two members, Mr. Lavoie and Mr. Burkett, we need to schedule the election of the chair and vice chair, and we'll have that on your September agenda since we are dark in August. And I think that's everything I have. And then Mr. Lyon, you had...
Flynn, before you turn over the mic.
Yeah.
About 10 days ago, a gentleman, and I have it on my notes at home, a gentleman from Mark Rios' office reached out to me. I'm assuming that is in response to our letter.
Yes.
His initial question was, could I help him locate the gates? I notionally know where these gates are, but I would not be the person to contact relative to the location of the gates. So
we'll see if Tracy can assist us.
I mentioned her name in the conversation.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Ken, please.
One most important thing I want to mention to you is we have finished the last fiscal year and the end of basically last year's work plan for the HSPB. So I'm going to be preparing material for you in September for you to develop your work plan for the 17-18 work year. As you know, in the past several years, the work plan has included several parts. You've had an education component, you've had an outreach component, and you've had an area of 6 or so properties that you've identified around the city that are your top priorities that you want to pursue, making recommendations for Class 1 designation. These work plans are important, and they're important from the point of view of the Preservation Board and this board as the city's agent in that topic, doing what I call getting out in front of the bulldozers. It's one thing to say, oh, there's a demo request and everybody, there's a flurry of activity. But if there's really something that's significantly historically important in our city, we shouldn't be waiting for the bulldozers to arrive. The board should be taking action and initiating preemptively those sites that it feels are significant enough in terms of conveying an important component of Palm Springs history. And that's why the work program is important. The second aspect of it, which we are behind on at the staff level, is this outreach issue. We had talked about in last year's work plan that we would facilitate the creation of a presentation to the Realtors Board. And I think we've seen now 2 demo requests where this is really an acute issue, where realtors misrepresent what can be done with a Class 1 structure. You hear people say all the time, nothing can be done to a Class 1 structure. Well, you know that's the furthest from the truth. You've also had situations here where people have gone in expecting to buy a house as a tear down, only to run into a process that's involved with helping the community make a decision on that question. So our outreach efforts, which primarily the board does a stellar job through the symposium and National Preservation Month, there are other very important pieces of community outreach that you've talked about that we recognize we have an important part to play to help support you in that, and that realtors outreach presentation, I had spoken with Flynn, is one that hopefully during the month of August, while we are dark, will hopefully give us a bit of time to put that thing together. But I'm going to come to you in September with sort of the outline of what you had from last year, what we got accomplished, what's yet to be accomplished, whether you want to continue with those things or shift to something else. So look forward to that material, and I'll try to get it out to you in advance of the meeting so you have some time to think about it. But I'll plant the seed in your heads today. Look at the city's historic resource survey. Look around at the buildings and the properties and the sites and the resources that you know that are in the city that are part of what make the city like no place else, to use the cliche, and bring those things and those ideas forward in September.
All right, Ken, on that note, Todd, just 1 second, please. And thank you for bringing the work plan back up. Yes, I think the presentation to the realtors is something that we've discussed at a number of times, and we do need to do that, and I think it would be welcomed by the realtors. I saw a number of realtors here in the room today raising some excellent questions, as Karen did, about I need information so that I can make the appropriate disclosures. And for September, if you would please, part of your presentation then, the 2 Class 1 historic site designations that I can recall easily that this board initiated was the Cody gas station and the Morito Place house. Can anyone help me remember anything else that we initiated?
The Racket Club and Tockwitz Plaza.
No, did we initiate Tockwitz Plaza? The Preservation Foundation brought the Tockwitz Plaza in.
Was it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay.
Preservation.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So Racket Club. Did you mention something else, Bill?
No.
Okay.
Town and Country, didn't we?
I don't think the Town Country was. So if you can help us clarify
Town
what
Country?
we did and what we didn't.
Yeah, I have the list that you had as your approved list from last year that was your work program. You've accomplished several of them.
Yeah.
And I'll let you know which ones are still out there, and you may continue to believe those are the ones you want to work on, or you may shift to something else.
Well, I think what I'd like to do is certainly remind us which ones we did accomplish, this board's initiation, and then again look at those others on the list that we want to put in front of the bulldozers. Yeah.
Okay.
Would it be helpful if we also created a list of properties that could be considered for nomination? And what brings this to mind is when we think about the Tockwitz Plaza, you know, that wasn't necessarily on anybody's radar screen per se until the issue came up. But I wonder if it would be helpful to have a sort of a master list of properties that we would identify under, you know, that would at some point come under consideration.
You have that. Yeah, that's what's in your citywide survey.
But have we really used it that much?
Well, it hasn't been fully adopted by the council yet, but it's there as that kind of resource for you.
Yeah, I remember us doing something, but I didn't know that we had really.
We have a list.
It's there, right?
Yeah, as part of the 2015 survey, you do have a list of potentially structures that could potentially be designated for Class 1 designation. That's a good starting point to look at in terms of the work plan and items that you think should come forward for Class 1 designation. One of the things to keep in mind, for example, Tockwitz Plaza, it's not even a Class 3 structure. It was built after 1969, so it's not even going to appear on the list. But again, the 2015 survey, which is on the city's website, it is posted there, it is accessible, is a good starting point in terms of looking at structures that would be eligible.
I thought we as a board prioritized a list of potential.
As part of your work plan, you did, yes.
So we have that.
Yes, you have that.
So we have a prioritized list that we voted on and approved of what we would like to do, because that's how we were going to spend. My question was, we didn't spend the $80,000 that the board gave us. That correct?
Well, it wasn't 80,000, it was 50,000.
Oh. They should have given us 80. Okay,
And
so the 50,000.
Ken came very close to spending that.
Oh, good. Well, so that was my question. A, how close did we come to spending the 50? So, sorry, and did we get that 50 again?
Yes, the city council gave us the same budget that they gave us last year.
Okay, so we have approximately
50,000.
5 or 6 nominations that we could do next year?
Potentially.
Yeah.
And I'm just remembering, we initiated the McQueen House, which is in process. So that was a part of those that we initiated.
As well as the Crocker Bank.
And the Crocker Bank, right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, but you'll review those for us in September.
And then, actually, just to clarify, is the McQueen House and the Crocker Bank part of that last fiscal year's? So we have 5 more that we could possibly nominate next year.
As many as we can make the money stretch for.
Right, yeah.
The last 3 or 4, I mean, I got barely under the wire to get into this fiscal year budget. I don't know how it happened.
Thank you.
Just extremely lucky. And a lot of begging and speaking nicely to a lot of people on the finance side. So yeah, they were good. They were good to help us with that.
But are we at roughly 5 or 6 we can do for that budget?
Based on what we're seeing, our costs coming in on these kinds of surveys in the past, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
That's great. Good.
And on that, it was brought up a while ago whether the RFPs could go to the nonprofits that had successfully written nominations in the past. Where is that in the queue?
I haven't gotten it done. I apologize. I just
understood.
haven't had the time to do it with all the other things that we have going on in the Department of Planning.
No, listen, I completely understand, and of course, you know, it slips off my radar. It should certainly slip off of yours with all the other work that you have to do, but then we have this discussion and then it pops up again, because right now, it goes to ARG mostly.
We have 4 different firms that we send these out to at this point in time, and we have the competitive process of having them submit proposals to us with their fees.
Well, it does seem to me that with the success of the nonprofits who have submitted nominations in the past, that they should be considered, but I understand there's a process you have to follow.
Yeah.
Any other staff comments? All right. Well, I'd like to say thank you for bringing Franco in and Jeff in, and fortunately, Franco did give us a little insight into where the Cornelia White House is, so that was excellent. So, very much appreciated.
Enjoy your month of August.
All right, thank you, and you too. Move to adjourn.
So moved. We are adjourned to your September meeting.
Thank you very much.
Also, Gary, in September, it'll be time to start planning for the. I know.
Are we smiling? Are we looking at work? Or what are we doing?
Or if I'm going to be the one that's doing it. You are. So that we can, because we have to get
Gotta warn you, I am the least
venue nailed down.
So then, quickly, before you leave, yes, have Ken agendize a discussion on the May event. Yeah, so that we have it on the agenda, we can form the subcommittee at that time. It'll all be good.
You get it sooner or later.